I was looking at past Wrestling Observer newsletters, and one thing that caught my eye was in December of 1997, a WWF house show ended in a riot. From what I read, the original card was changed, and the show had terrible matches, including The Undertaker defeating The Rock in a 2-minute casket match. The main event was for Triple H to go against Ken Shamrock or Shawn Michaels to go against Ken Shamrock. Michaels got on the mic and got the crowd all pissed off. Someone threw, and I am not kidding when I say this, a piece of paper at Shawn, and Shawn left the building with Hunter and Chyna. The crowd then started throwing chairs, cups, and other stuff in the ring. The cops were called, and they threw tear gas to get the crowd to go away from the building and out of the arena. Jim, do you have any recollection of this riot? Also, would a riot have been a bad idea for the WWF in 1997?
Well, I do remember that because the day after it happened, well, I can't say the day after, but within a day or two, depending on what day of the week it was, we were over at Vince's while he's getting the phone calls. And the crowd was being rowdy. It was Little Rock, Arkansas at Barton Coliseum, right? It's a rowdy fucking crowd. And they actually had Danny Hodge there, as I recall, as a guest referee also. JR had set that up, the biggest wrestling star except for Bill Watts ever in the area. And actually probably bigger than Bill Watts in Little Rock, Hodge was. But anyway, and it was going to be another house show, but they were doing that Degeneration X bullshit at the time. I don't remember the Undertaker match being an issue. And if it was that short in a house show, it may have been because one of those guys were hurt. Right. So I don't want to put blame on them that the people may not have liked it, but that was not them being pricks. The gist that I got of it from the reports that we heard from, I think I wasn't there, but Jack Lanza was one of the agents that was reporting into Vince. And of course, Shawn has to be on the phone with him and all this other stuff, was that they came out doing their Degeneration X bullshit. And it probably was a rowdy crowd in Little Rock because they always were. And I bet somebody probably pulled Shawn's hair on the way to the ring. But when they started throwing the cups and shit, he just took it upon himself, say, okay, fuck it, there ain't going to be no fucking match. And fucking left with, I think Hodge was still standing there. It was going to be Helmsley and Shawn against somebody in a tag, I think, Shamrock and somebody. I don't know. The point is, and they do leave and they don't come back. And fucking, goddamn, it's more. Shawn Michaels taking a bad situation, and instead of trying to do something to get out of it, I mean, we worked, the Midnight Express Rock and Roll and I worked one night in Boone, North Carolina at a college gym where they were throwing tennis balls at the ring by the dozens. And one of us just stood on the apron, and I looked out at the crowd, and two guys wrestled while their partners stood on the apron and looked out for anything more dangerous. And then they changed position, and we got through with it, whatever the fuck. And then I yelled at people afterwards. But he just took off and left and wasn't going to come back and sent the people into a fucking riot because now they've been in a kind of a bad show anyway. And plus, think the kind of wrestling shows that Little Rock was used to. And it was a WWF house show back in those days. So anyway, so they all got pissed. They got fucked around. And here came the cops and the tear gas and the whole 9 yards. Yeah, it was a big major fucking deal because Shawn Michaels made a bad situation worse, as he did in almost every situation he was in back in those days.
I have to ask you a question about all this, but I must say it is surprising more people did not throw tennis balls at you throughout your career when you really think about it.
Well, but when they did, they found out it's kind of stupid to throw a tennis ball at a fucking guy with a tennis racket, because I'd drill it back at them, and then Elliot Murnick or somebody come in, oh, you're going to get a suit, and then go and get your fucking cops to disarm them.
That's the one thing in wrestling I never got to see, was you hitting the tennis balls back at the fans. That's the one thing I want to see now.
You can hit them a lot fucking harder than you can throw them too. So
to the question about Shawn Michaels, you bring up that you're at Vince's house when he has this phone call, and Jack Lanza's on the call, who's the agent, and Shawn's on the call, who is one of the top guys, if not the top guy at that moment. I mean, who's to say, but also highly influential. And I'm wondering, an agent, Jack Lanza in this instance, how do they do their job? If they have to tell you what exactly happened, and you have this vindictive, troublemaking, addicted top star who is going to be either on the phone with you at the same time or is going to be in your boss's ear the whole time burying you or something. I mean, how hard is that? How hard was it? I know you've talked about your experiences, but for an agent, how hard was it during the Shawn Michaels era to deal with?
Well, it depended on who it was. I mean, he would still, in effect, he would disrespect Pat Patterson with just his behavior with some of the matches, or whether he was going to do them, or whether he was going to do the job in them or take them seriously or whatever. But he wouldn't just disrespect Pat to his face. And Jack Lanza was pretty decent around too. But as somebody like Jack would, with that kind of weathered tone in his voice, and I mean, everybody wasn't on the same fucking phone call. Vince didn't go, okay, let's have a conference call. No, he wanted to get the true story, so he got them all privately. Every once in a while, it'd be a conference call, but Jack would say, well, and Shawn felt that he wasn't safe, kind of thing like that, which told Vince what he needed to know. It just, they were just doing that shit because they could get away with it suddenly. And which is what caused the whole thing with Brett, who did take the business more seriously as for the good of all the people in the business, and et cetera, et cetera. But, it was just, what are you going to, and then Tony Gurria, I don't know if he ever talked to fucking Shawn. He probably, he was doing underneath matches. He was happy to stay away from the whole thing, I'm sure. Gerald Briscoe was never, from the time they did the curtain call thing, Gerald was probably about as hot as I was about it. And I think we topped the list. So he didn't like putting up with all that shit. But, if Vince put up with it, then everybody else had to put up with it. And as I've mentioned before, when I asked Jerry Jarrett here on his program one time, what would you have done if with the curtain call, if your two biggest stars who you had made more money than they'd ever made in their lives and put your championship on them and made them your main event attractions, exposed the business in front of the fans in your main building, in your main city? He said it would have been just like the day after they assassinated Kennedy. We would have been sorry that they were gone, but life would go on. He would have fired their fucking asses on the spot, regardless of how big of stars they were. Because at that point, especially at that point in time, with those guys in the main events, business couldn't have really got too much worse.
That's the thing. So many people are fascinated by the relationship between Vince and Shawn Michaels throughout the years. And part of it's because Vince gave him the power like he was a Antonino Rocca-like draw. And he wasn't. The ratings didn't go up. The house shows went down.
Well, look at the pull he gave, and I mean my old friend, my bosom buddy Kevin Nash. But let's face it, Kevin Nash never drew a fucking dime until he went to WCW, and the reason he drew a dime is because they thought he was still working for the WWF. That's what got him over. Vince pushed him to the fucking moon, and he was over in that audience, but it wasn't like he was over to a new audience that was suddenly coming to see him because he was over. The people that came to the WWF in that era, he was over with them, as that's why when he mentioned that he was the lowest paid WWF champion in history, Gerald Briscoe responded because he was the lowest drawing WWF champion in history. He became a megastar by going to WCW and convincing people he was still with the WWF.
Do you think Vince enjoyed the Clique torturing everyone? Legitimately.
Probably in the same part of his brain that likes the fart jokes and shit. I think he did, and I don't know why, but it was such silliness. It began the sillyingness of our business, and it started making everybody's job so much harder to make people to take the shit seriously enough to pay for it when everybody was acting like a fucking juvenile on camera in order to try to get over with a goddamn, audience with the attention span of a fucking gnat, like that watched the Jerry Springer show. Wonder where they got that from.